Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and being here today. Um, like Yusuf said, I am also zooming in from the unceded lands of the Hunkaminam and Squamish speaking peoples. Similarly, I want to address and acknowledge the heartbreak and grief that folks must be feeling today after a family was callously killed because of deep-seated hatred and Islamophobia. I want to say that I stand with you, that I will always fight for justice alongside you, and that my heart breaks for you and for your communities that had to deal with the violence of Islamophobia again and again and again. There are so many reasons why it's important for people who are not Muslim to be advocating alongside you on a level of basic humanity. It's the bare minimum. But I think it's also pertinent when we're talking about topics like climate and coming together for World Environment Day and World Oceans Day, because Islamophobia was systemically created, just like the other isms and the other phobias that we experience today. I once heard a climate justice activist say something along the lines of, I'm not a climate justice activist because I'm passionate about the trees. I'm a climate justice activist because the US bombed my country for oil. And the Syrian refugee crisis was in part driven by conflicts over an oil pipeline. The violence in the Middle East more broadly has largely been due to the desire for US control over oil and natural resources. And when we're talking about the global manifestations of Islamophobia, there are many parallels to the conversations that many people have been having and starting to have around residential schools that have come up in the last week because of the recent discovery of the 215 children at the former Kamloops residential school. Residential schools and the subjugation and dehumanization of Indigenous peoples was done so intentionally so that colonizers could extract resources from the land that is now known as Canada. This colonization continues today, and this resource extraction continues today in the form of pipelines and other extractive projects. And racism is integral to the success of this resource extraction because it allows for corporations, for governments to do so without consequence and to do so without accountability and to do so in a way that is politically acceptable. This is why it's so important to center the conversation of climate justice when we talk about environmentalism. At the very root of it, climate change is racist because our systems are racist, and the destruction of the planet is dependent upon racism. Today, runaway capitalism and immense corporate profits are dependent upon cheap labor, which requires racism for people in wealthier countries to be able to defend or ignore. The extraction for the raw products requires destroying the lands where people live, and to do so, again, without any accountability, requires the dehumanization of those who live there. A project that is ongoing and currently being built is the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline project. Like Yusuf said, I cycled from Ottawa to Burnaby against the project while fundraising for Indigenous land and water defenders who were fighting the project in court. And this project is significant not only because of how the emissions from the project will render our climate targets virtually impossible, but also because of its impacts on the ocean. The expansion project will triple the capacity of the pipeline to 890,000 barrels of oil per day. This is bad enough on land, but on water, it's expected to increase tanker traffic sevenfold. And a recent SFU study estimated that the probability of a tanker spill over a 50-year operating period is between 43 and 75%. And a spill could cost as much as $2.6 billion. For a pipeline that is already costing us $12.6 billion, it's beginning to add up, and it's making even less and less sense every single day, economically, environmentally, on a justice level. And so if there's a spill, this impacts everything from salmon to potentially fragile habitats. And even just on the ocean's perspective, this is again a climate justice issue because of the ways that many First Nations communities have deep relationships with the lands and waters and depend more on the health of ecosystems and marine life. Even in the extremely unlikely scenario that there is no spill ever, the sevenfold increase in tanker traffic will have devastating impacts on marine life, especially on larger marine life like the southern resident killer whale, which is endangered, and the humpback whale. There are rippling effects of climate destroying impacts that many racialized and Indigenous communities have been leading the fight on. And our survival depends on listening, uplifting, and amplifying those voices in our fight for a world that is not only livable, but just. Thank you.